Welcome to the Week 9 breakdowns for Dana White Contender Series. Decent season so far. Not a lot of guys that I'm really jumping off the page and I'm excited about to make their UFC debut. There was one last weekend that I'm excited about, and obviously talk about that in the recap. But a couple quick notes right off the top here. Obviously a little tardy with the breakdowns here. After a very tumultuous UFC 320, I felt like I really needed a break. You know, I that was one of the worst events that I had of the year. So I took Sunday completely off. Got back to the studying on Monday, and then by the time that I was finished studying up, it was a little too late. I felt a little bit too exhausted, so I pushed off the breakdowns for this morning. Other notes is quickly that I won't be able to do my usual UFC content this week, so you'll still get the MMA Lotcast either later on Tuesday night or by Wednesday afternoon. I will also be dropping a Legacy Warriors podcast breaking down LFA 219 for you guys by Wednesday evening. But outside of that, no lock of the night candidates, no locky two-step, no prop drop, no chalk or not. I just won't have the time this week. I do have family visiting from out of town, and I don't want to be that dickhead that's just stuck in my studio just doing work while everybody else is hanging out. So I'm going to take most of this week off, obviously get you guys the full card breakdowns as usual. So I do want to just highlight that for you guys right off the bat here. Speaking of the tumultuous UFC 320, I'll cover that on the MMA Lawcast episode when I break down UFC Rio, so stay tuned for that. The one thing I can be proud of are that my Blue Jays are up 2-0 on the New York Yankees in the playoffs here for the MLB. So they got Game 3 tonight going down in New York. Hopefully they're able to bring it on home for us so that we can advance to the next round. Feeling pretty good, especially after their first two performances against the Yankees. So keeping that in mind, that's what's keeping me afloat right now after having a shitty UFC 320. All right, let's do a quick recap of Week 8 of the Contender Series. You guys know I like quickly talking about the fights prior, just to give my thoughts on some of the fighters and some of the performances. The first one up was obviously Rashid Vagabov going up against Paulo da Silva. I felt pretty good about Vagabov there. I parlayed him, and I took the under in that matchup, but it seemed to me that he was gassed after that first round. He hit his second gear probably later on in that second and early on in that third round. I don't know if I had to do with the weight cut because he seemed a little bit rough on the scales the day before, but I felt if he went to his grappling immediately, he probably would have found that finish over Da Silva, and he probably would have earned himself a contract as well. Instead, he puts on one of the more embarrassing performances. He won that fight clear as day, but to be showboating to Dana White and Dana just like, hey, go finish this guy or do something more than you're doing. It's very embarrassing for a guy like Vagabov, who I believe is a UFC level flyweight. So it doesn't surprise me that Dana didn't end up signing him. But again, just some of the volatility in Contender Series, right? This guy should go out there and normally finish a guy like Paulo da Silva, especially when you see the guys he's finishing going into that matchup. Very unfortunate there for Vagabov. Then we had the complete beatdown courtesy of Curtis Campbell, the Pink Panther, over Demba Sek, the other biggest favorite on the card. And Campbell showed exactly why, just absolutely mauling Sek, getting him to the ground and just TKOing him. Campbell is one of the guys that, from this season so far, I'm very excited to see in the UFC. People want to make the Paddy Pimblett comparisons, but I feel like this guy could be even more dominant. Once he gets fights to the ground, he's very good in terms of securing position and getting off on nasty ground and pound. Pimblett's not too far off, but I feel Campbell could have an even more successful career and not have to handpick his way to the top. You can throw anybody at him, and I think he'll come out successful more often than not. So very excited for his entrance into the UFC. Then we had the lone underdog pull off the upset here in Christopher Alvidrez, who goes out there and absolutely mollywhops Eliezer Cubanza. That's one. Shout out to one of the guys in the comment section who said Alvidrez was probably the livest dog, and I acknowledged that he was probably right, but I said I'd still be shocked if he ended up getting the job done. But Alvidrez came on a mission, and he did not let Cubanza off the leash as soon as he got into that fight and took command of that fight. So shout out to Alvidrez. I have some question marks about his ceiling in the UFC, but that was a damn good performance to earn himself a UFC contract. Then we had Louis Jourdain getting a third round submission over Magno Diaz. It seemed by that second round that he started to really bully and big brother Magno Diaz. It was a very great performance from Jourdain. There's only one moment that he really found himself in trouble when Diaz had his back. But outside of that, showed great submission defense, showed his striking, and then eventually showed his BJJ as well. And then showcased that he deserves to be on the biggest stage in the world alongside his brother Charles. So very excited to have some Canadian brothers in the UFC, both guys that are very talented as well. And yeah, great performance for Jourdain there. And then we cashed on him as a minus 160 favorite as well, which seemed like a gift considering how dominant he ended up making that fight look. Then we had the main event where the odds were really fluctuating over the last 24 hours going into that matchup. I think I bet Damian Pines. Actually, I had Pines parlayed with Vagabov and Campbell because I wanted to get some underdog odds on Pines if I wanted to take a shot there. And it ended up buying fight time. He ended up being the underdog anyway. But he goes out there, stifles the movement heavy approach of Costa, and then just absolutely melts him with that jab cross combination. Solid addition to the middleweight division. He seems like he's still a little bit raw, but still very good in terms of letting his power go and getting opponents out that way. So solid addition to the UFC roster there as well. And yeah, I think everybody who got a contract obviously earned a contract based off their performances. The best fighter may either be Campbell or Vagabov. But again, Vagabov obviously doesn't get into the UFC, even though he is probably one of the more UFC ready fighters on that entire, not even just last week, the entire season thus far. So there you guys go. Week 8 recap there. We did cash on that. Let me just get the exact results here. Plus 2.43 units for a 46% ROI. Cash on Louis Jourdain at minus 160. Cashed on the Pines, Campbell and Vagabov parlay at plus 146, and then we ended up taking an L on the Vagabov under 1.5 at plus 140. So still come out on the winning end. Happy about that. And we'll see if we can carry it on to this week's Contender Series. 5 fights to talk about. There are some very questionable spots on this. And I mean that in terms of how in the hell that the UFC matchmakers looked at the tape on some of these fighters and said, let's give this guy an opportunity. Makes absolutely no sense. But we'll talk about it in the breakdowns here. So let's get right into it. First matchup up, we got Luke Fernandez coming in at minus 1,000, going up against Rafael Pergentino, who comes in at plus 650. Now, Fernandez is a guy that I came across about 2.5 years ago when I covered CFFC, and he was just making his pro debut as a 6-0 amateur and the reigning amateur lightweight or light heavyweight champion for the promotion. He had finished the majority of his opponents on the amateur scene with his wrestling and BJJ approach, but started to trust his hands once he made it to the pro ranks, and it's paid off for him for a lot of these matchups. Specifically that pro debut where I actually picked against him because I thought his opponent had a better striking game. And at plus 260 with that striking advantage, I thought Derek Overstreet was the side there, but Fernandez proved me wrong emphatically by knocking Overstreet out in that first round. Fernandez's last performance against Christian Edwards, who was a 8-time Bellator veteran, was a solid, mature performance from Fernandez, who continued to keep his undefeated record in tow from his amateur days to his pro days. Fernandez was able to really rough Edwards up against the cage, tried landing multiple takedowns, but he really felt the need to stay away from the striking of Edwards, so he continuously pushed him up against the cage and did some good work with his dirty boxing and some knees up the middle. He's a very high-level grappling specialist as well, as we saw when he went to the CFFC BJJ or even Fury Grappling, where he most recently submitted former UFC fighter Phil Hawes. He even has a grappling win over Eric Anders from a couple of events back as well. Normally, I like to fade these Northeastern guys, but Luke Fernandez looks to be the goods and has some very good skills coming into this Contender Series opportunity. Now, when we're talking about the worst fighter to appear on this season of the Contender Series, there are a few names that come to mind, but Rafael Pergentino may be the worst of them all. You're talking about a guy with a 5-0 record, all but one of his wins coming in the first round, the other one coming in the second round, which was actually his last fight. But this guy competed at heavyweight for pretty much his entire career before coming down to 205 for this matchup. But God, he is bad. Like, bad, guys. It's sure he might have a puncher's chance to win this matchup, just as you would expect at the higher weight classes. It seems like he prefers the striking more than anything. He's able to get takedowns because he faces very low level competition. But his last matchup, good Lord. I'm going to see if I can actually clip it and put it in here for you guys. At the ending of the first round, his opponent just teased off on him. Like, just teased off, and any referee could have stepped in and stopped that matchup, considering how many clean shots he was eating. But it seemed like his opponent gassed himself out trying to finish Pergentino at the ending of that first round. The Pergentino was able to get that second round going, got the takedown, and eventually got a rear naked choke there. And I think a lot of that had to do with the exhaustion. But this guy is not good. Gassing out after 3 to 4 minutes, horrible technique, just bad. I think Fernandez runs through this guy. I don't know why I'm spending so long on this breakdown. Fernandez runs through this guy. If I can get a round one prop at anything better than minus 150 to minus 200, or even minus 185, I'm probably going to take that prop on Fernandez, because if he is not fucking about, he will take Pergentino to the ground and smash him immediately. He should have no issues in this matchup. Yeah. Minus 1,000 is warranted in this matchup, guys. This Brazilian is not good. Sticking with the trend of guys that don't really deserve an opportunity on the Contender Series this season, we got this next matchup between Luis Felipe Diaz, who comes in at plus 105, going up against Donovan Hedrick, who comes in at minus 125. Now, Diaz has not competed since February of 2023, I believe it is, or June of 2023. It's been about 2.5 years since he stepped foot in the cage. He was actually supposed to fight two-time Dana White Contender Series veteran Murtaza Talha on a regional promotion out there in Russia last year, but Diaz was forced to pull out. But Diaz, a training partner of recent Dana White Contender Series signing Manuel Sosa. He used to train at PRVT, which is a gym that Jessica Andrade originally started her career with. Seems like that gym has kind of gone to the wayside, hence why Diaz is now with this new team. He's a BJJ black belt. He did go on a 7-fight winning streak, but he's now 1-2 in his last 3 fights. That one win coming over a very low-level opponent. Those other 2 wins coming against guys that were able to take him to the ground and really just cause him some issues there. But it seems like, since that time off, he's really been focusing on his BJJ and trying to improve that aspect of his game. Because normally he's a guy that likes to slowly plod forward, utilize his Muay Thai approach, landing big shots and trying to knock his opponents out. I was really trying to scratch my head and trying to figure out how the hell this guy got an opportunity on the Contender Series when there are so many other guys more deserving of this spot. Then I saw that he is managed by Ali Abdelaziz, who we all know has his in with the UFC brass, and for some reason they're willing to just bend to his demands. And maybe Diaz was one of those guys where they're like, sure, we'll do this one for you. I don't want to say he's horrible, but again, not fighting in 2.5 years, 1-2 in his last 3 fights. There are so many other opportunities and options that the UFC could buy into, but yet they're giving this guy a shot. Now, luckily for Diaz, he's going up against a guy who took this fight on only a week's notice, and Donovan Hedrick, who I believe got the call on October 1st, and now he's stepping in to try to make the most of this opportunity. He's another guy that has not competed in over 16 months, so you have to wonder what kind of fighting shape he's coming into. Normally, he's a guy that likes to go out there and just, he can do whatever he wants in his fights. He's finished all of his opponents. I think he's 5-0 or 6-0. He's athletic, good power, good speed, good agility, but he's just fought nothing but bums in his career. These guys crack under the pressure even before stepping in the cage. That's why he's able to get these guys to the ground so easily, and then from there he just lands a couple big shots and they're folding and the referee is forced to step in. Only 2 of his 6 fights have gone past the 2-minute mark. Every other opponent has cracked under 2 minutes or so. His physical advantages are usually enough to get away at this level of MMA, but the fact that he has faced no resistance probably won't do him any favors going into this matchup. Now, he could be facing tougher competition, so maybe he has a shot, and I can understand why the public may be looking to take a shot on this athletic specimen, but Diaz will throw back. Diaz will maybe even look for his own takedowns. And Diaz, with the experience that he already has, probably is the side in this matchup. Of course, Hedrick could utilize his speed and agility and land that power and get Diaz out of there quickly. But, Diaz kind of harder to put away than most guys. And Hedrick, again, he might have a horrible gas tank. He only took this fight on a week's notice and hasn't fought in a year and a half. So hard to justify the Hedrick side of things here. Maybe the under 1.5 might be the better way to go about it. But I'm expecting a quick finish here from either side. I'm going to lean on the Diaz side at slight plus money. Again, overall, on paper, it looks like Diaz is the better fighter. It's the physical traits of Hedrick that make things a little bit more murky here. But I think that if Diaz wants to take this to the ground, his BJJ advantage should help him get some dominant positions and eventually find that finish. So even if he wants to slug it out on the feet, he has a solid Muay Thai background that might be able to translate here against the guy, again, who's only taking this fight on a week's notice. So I'm going to go Diaz inside the distance, under 1.5, probably the better way to go about it. But there should be violence within 5 minutes of this fight. Our next up, we got Imanol Rodriguez coming in at minus 230 going up against Hoki Jr., who comes in at plus 195. Now, Rodriguez was on this most recent season of The Ultimate Fighter where he came up short in the semifinal by split decision against eventual winner of the show, Joseph Morales. Now, that was a very close fight, and I remember there was a lot of controversy after the match had finished, and a lot of people saying that Rodriguez got robbed. But upon watching that fight, it was a close fight. That first round, clearly for Morales. First round for Morales. Third round for Rodriguez. Second round, it was literally 50-50. Rodriguez won the first half of that round, and then I thought Morales won the second half of that round. And we know with judges, sometimes they have a short memory, and whatever they see last or see endured for long in that last half of that round probably sticks with them more, and hence why two judges ended up giving that second round to Morales. But close fight, very impressive for a kid that was still so young in his career, going against a veteran like Morales who has been in the UFC before and fought some of the higher level of competition that the sport has to offer. But Rodriguez has been a lifelong martial artist, obviously 5-6-0 in MMA, showcasing very good striking from his Fury FC days to even earlier in his career. Very fast, very speedy with his hands. He has some nasty power as well when he can connect cleanly enough. And then he has wrestling in his back pocket if he needs it. He's been at the highest levels, even from, I think he was a part of the Pan Ams for judo. Very high level martial artist all around. It's all about gaining that experience now and then applying it against guys that are not going to go away so easily. One thing I love that he's done for this training camp, he got picked by Team Cormier on the show. He decided to join Daniel Cormier's new training camp as well, Cormier's Academy, Daniel Cormier Academy, whatever the hell it's called, in Gilroy, California. And Rodriguez has entrenched himself over there with some other very good talent. And I think that's only going to help his game. He looks like he has high potential. He's still very young as well, 25 years old. So the sky's the limit for this kid. Now it's all about accruing that experience so that he can be more effective at the higher levels. Now, knowing that he was on The Ultimate Fighter and that the UFC is giving him this opportunity because he had such a close fight with the eventual winner, you would assume that they're giving him a bit of a layup here to try to get right into the UFC because that's probably where he deserves to be. But Junior is not a bad fighter by any means. He's 10-2, riding a 3-fight winning streak. That loss that he suffered last time around, he's now 5-1 in his last 6. That one loss that he had was against a very experienced opponent, but I think there's an argument that he totally deserved to win that fight. He clearly won the third round, but for the majority of the fight, he was walking his opponent down, landing big shots, landing combinations. Sure, he got hit in return a few times, but I thought for the most part, Junior's pace, pressure, and activity was enough for him to win that fight. But for some reason, he ended up getting robbed and losing that fight. So luckily for him, he only needed 3 more wins to get this opportunity on the Contender Series. He's finished 9 of his 10 wins, and he's obviously been starting to face better competition in the last 2.5 years. He's very good. He looks very good with his Muay Thai. His takedown defense is a little bit sketchy, but he does stay active off of his back to try to create submission opportunities, reversals, scrambles, try to work back to his feet. Very solid fighter. I was really thinking that Rodriguez was going to get a layup here, but it doesn't seem like it. I feel the odds are a little bit wide. We are seeing to start to trickle down a little bit. When I researched this matchup yesterday, Rodriguez was up at about minus 270. So to be down at minus 230 now makes sense. I expect it to continue to start falling. Before I went to sleep last night, it actually got to minus 210. So I think the big reason we're getting a lot of love on Rodriguez is because we know him already from the Ultimate Fighter. And as soon as people see demo fight on a fighter's record, they kind of just auto fade them, just as we have with Junior, who he was facing a decent opponent when he fought for demo fight. But again, demo fight has kind of been known to be just giving a lot of layups to a lot of their fighters and a lot of their prospects. I don't think that could be said for that matchup specifically for Junior. Tough fight to really plant a flag on either side given the odds. I think Rodriguez wins. I think that the difference maker here is going to be his grappling. I think if he finds himself in some trouble in the striking realm, he can change levels and secure a takedown and kind of just eat some clock there. But I think this will be very competitive for the most part. I think Rodriguez can get success off on the feet. And the other thing I quickly want to point out here, both these guys are managed by the same company, Iridium. And Iridium, knowing that Rodriguez was going to get this opportunity, no doubt, you would assume that they kind of just want to give their guy a very winnable matchup so they can get right into the UFC. But after running the tape, I don't really see it. Maybe they see it. Maybe they know something and they're like, all right, this should be a very winnable fight for Rodriguez. But I go based off of tape. And what I've seen on tape, Junior is no slouch. So, if the line had started to get closer to like plus 250 for Junior, I may have taken a little bit of a shot on him there. But I think Rodriguez wins. I think he wins this by decision. The overs, especially at plus money, may not be a bad spot. Again, this could be a very competitive matchup. And if there are grappling sequences like I expect there to be, this will be a tougher matchup to call. So the over is probably what I'd go with more than anything. But I think Rodriguez ends up winning this fight on the scorecards. All right. Next up, we got Adrian Luna Martinetti coming in at plus 125, going up against Mark Vologdin, who comes in at minus 145. Now, Martinetti has a tremendous 14-fight winning streak that he's on, which compiles up his 16-1 record now. He's won a couple of regional titles as well down there in Mexico. His lone defeat came 8 years ago against an undefeated fighter. Since then, 14 straight wins, 8 of those by finish. He normally showcases a love for the grappling game where he seems very slick on the ground. Good submissions off of his back, good scrambles, great at taking the back of his opponent. And he's a little bit lanky for the division as well, so that kind of helps him secure submissions and positions with those limbs that he brings to the table there. His striking, not that bad. He has a solid kicking game as well, especially when he starts to target the lead calf of his opponent. If he stays persistent with enough, he can really damage his opponents and force them to fight in a secondary stance, which is often not the more comfortable way for fighters to be competing. His brother, I believe they're twins. I could be off on that, but is also a fighter. He has a 15-1 record right now, who had also competed on the Contender Series back in 2022, but had come up short by split decision against Alessandro Costa. It seems like Martinetti has largely been training at the UFC PI in Mexico. He's been finishing up his training camp down there at the Iridium Gym in Vegas alongside Brandon Moreno. Again, more of a grappler than a striker, but also has some decent level of opposition in recent fights, which will obviously help him as he starts fighting tougher competition. Now, he's going up against Vologdin, who trains out of the All-Stars Sweden gym, and he's been fighting for their promotion in their last 4 fights, I believe, for the All-Stars Fight Night. And it seemed like they kind of just gave him some very favorable matchups, and he was able to produce a lot of finishes. He's riding a 7-fight winning streak with his last 5 coming by finish. Prior to his 4th last fight, he was mainly in the Russian fight scene, where we saw him fight some very stiff competition, and he actually ended up coming up short in a couple of those spots. He was 8-3-1 before he moved over to Sweden and started fighting for that AFN gym. Or that promotion. But again, that experience that he accrued before moving over to Sweden was obviously very helpful for him But the issue is on that Russian fight scene, we didn't see much of his game outside of his grappling. He would immediately get takedowns, and he wouldn't do the best job in terms of advancing positions, but rather just sticking his opponent's head up against the cage when he had them on the mat. And landing good enough ground and pound that he would avoid any stand-ups from the referee, or even keeping his opponents on their back because they were unable to work to a position to get back to their feet. He has some very cool striking. He comes from a Kyokushin karate background. There's actually a pinned post that he has on his Instagram page of him fighting as a kid, and he pulled off this crazy jumping, spinning back kick that landed cleanly on his opponent's chin and just put his opponent out cold. It was nasty. It was hard to watch because they were still 10 to 14 years old or something like that. No more than 14 years old. And to see his opponent go out stiff like that, a kid, losing brain cells that early in their life, not a good look. But that just shows kind of the power that he had even as a kid. He has a good kicking game, solid punches when he gets inside the pocket with the power that he possesses. And then he obviously has his wrestling if he needs to rely on that as well. So on paper, it looks like Vologdin is the side, and I get that's why he's the favorite in this spot. But I wonder if Martinetti's BJJ and just gangly limbs on the ground could cause Vologdin some issues, even in the striking realm, right? That could help Martinetti kind of just keep his distance and really pick apart Vologdin from distance. But I think Vologdin has the speed, the durability, and the power to crash that pocket and let go with his big strikes as well. I'm expecting violence in this matchup. I think both guys are capable of putting each other away, whether it's Vologdin by knockout or Martinetti by submission. I'm going to lead Vologdin, but the issue I have with betting him here, he's been fighting very easy competition in his last couple of fights, so this would be a clear step up from that, but he has faced some difficult competition even before. So, it's a tough one. Martinetti is the real wild card here because we don't know how good he can actually be. I'm going to go Vologdin by knockout probably, but I'll probably pass on this fight and see how this one ends up playing out. But I feel like the winner of that matchup will likely earn themselves a contract, but I think it's going to be the Russian here who ends up getting the job done. All right. That brings us to our main event of week 9 now, where we have Brazilian Lucas Caldas coming in at plus 315, going up against Magomed Zaynukov, who comes in at minus 420. Now, Caldas is coming into the biggest fight of his career with a 6-1 record. Caldas could easily be undefeated at this point in time as well. His lone defeat actually came by DQ from March, and that was a matchup where he was beating the piss out of his opponent. And then near the ending of that second round, his opponent was kind of turtled up on the ground as he was eating some big shots, and Caldas was trying to throw everything at him to try to get him out of there. Unfortunately, one of the strikes he ended up throwing was a foot stomp to the ribs of his opponent, which is illegal. You can kick them, you can't stomp them. And that's where he ended up, learning his lesson, ended up getting DQ'd. He did end up picking up another win between then, and that was enough for the UFC to be like, all right, let's give this guy a shot. He's very aggressive, has some very good Muay Thai, loves to pressure his opponents, love to just stay in their face. His takedown defense is a little bit of an issue, but he seems to stay safe enough on the ground that he can eventually work back to his feet, and then he gets back onto the gas and really stays in his opponent's face. He's finished all but one of his opponents in the first round. There was only one fight where we saw him get clipped, but he quickly regained his wits and then was able to get back on the gas and eventually find the finish himself. Like I said, his takedown defense is a little bit sketchy. Does a good job of working back to his feet. He could be a fun addition to the UFC roster considering the entertaining nature of his fights. Like I said, he always stays on the gas, stays moving forward, stays aggressive. He trains out of a Nova União affiliated gym down there in Brazil, and even has recent tough finalist Rodrigo Cezinado often in his corner. So I'm expecting to see him there tonight as well. Now he's going up against a Dagestani, a guy that I could break down 1,000 times, and it's probably going to sound the same as every other Dagestani that I've broken down. He's finished his first 5 wins, but he's now gone to back-to-back decisions in the UAE Warriors promotion. He's faced some stellar competition throughout his career, and I think the steps up in competition in his last 2 fights kind of goes to show that like he may not be as much of a finisher as we thought he was, because it's going to get harder to finish these guys when they actually provide some resistance. He has a decent grappling game. I question his control at times. And then in the striking realm, he's obviously improving that style too. He has a solid calf kick that he started to lean on in recent fights. I'm not sure of his comfort level in terms of dealing with guys that can halt his takedowns and actually have an aggressive striking approach. That's actually what he's fighting this weekend, so we'll have some questions answered there. He's a Nurmagomedov in a sense, where he trains alongside Makhachev and the rest of the Nurmagomedovs there. Has a good gas tank to go 15 minutes if he needs to as well, and it completely makes sense why he's minus 420 here. Now, the issue that I have with some of the odds here, the total and the odds. So the money line obviously favors Zaynukov, and in my opinion, it probably, if it favors him, that means this fight is going to go into deeper water, because Caldas originally is kind of hard to put away. You know, unless Zaynukov bonks him in the opening minutes of this and counters the aggressive approach, sure, that's a possibility, but I think he's going to have to get to his wrestling, and I don't think that Caldas is just going to roll over and let him get a quick finish here. So the over is actually at, plus 140-ish as of this recording, whereas the under is chalked at about minus 165. And I think if it's under, it's more than likely that his Brazilian counterpart ends up getting this win here, which you can get at plus 315 on his money line. So I think if you like Zaynukov, maybe taking the over could be the more profitable way here. My only concern with taking Zaynukov at minus 420 is if Caldas is able to thwart his early grappling attempts and force Zaynukov to strike with him. Caldas can make him very, very uncomfortable in the striking round with that constant forward movement. So I don't feel comfortable taking the chalk on Zaynukov. I'd rather take a little bit more of a risk here and take the over 1.5. And I hope that Zaynukov can stay safe enough with the clinch and the grappling and stay away from the aggressive approach from Caldas. And then eventually go on either to get a late finish or a decision win. And then if you like Caldas, his money line is more than good enough for you to take a shot on him there too. So I think the under 1.5 is not worth playing, because I think if the win comes under 1.5, it will be the Brazilian getting his hand raised. So I'll go Zaynukov by decision, but I like the over 1.5 more than anything in this matchup. So all in all, not a great card to bet on, in my opinion. There are not a lot of spots that I'm feeling too hot about. As of this recording, I already have 2 plays on the MMALOTN Patreon page that you can find in the pinned comment in the comment section. You guys can find the link there. I might add another 1 or 2 spots, maybe 1 for sure that I'm leaning on as of right now. But again, tough card to bet. I wouldn't advise going too heavy on this card, because there are some very flaky spots and some very sketchy spots as well. All right, that's a wrap on Week 9 Contender Series. Next week is Week 10. Can't believe we're already at the end of the season here. For my work rate, I'm kind of happy that it's winding down now. But in terms of a fan, I always love some Tuesday night fights as well. All right, later tonight or probably Wednesday afternoon, I'll have my UFC Rio full card breakdown out, so make sure you guys stay tuned for that. And then I'll have my Legacy Warriors podcast for LFA 219. I believe it's 219. That will be out more than likely by Wednesday evening. As of Wednesday midnight, I want to be off the grid. I want to be completely disconnected from my work, because that's when my family is coming into town. So I don't want to have to open up my laptop outside of posting my final plays and predictions for the LFA and UFC cards. But again, that should only take me 10 to 15 minutes. All right, I'm blabbering too much. I apologize, guys. I missed you. Maybe that's what it is. All right, I'll see you guys again for the UFC 320 breakdown. See you guys then. Peace.